Welcome to the Authentic Faith Podcast. This is my story, and I am your host, Andrea John. We are all on a journey that consists of stories, and there are real people like you and me, and they have stories that deserve to be shared. Stories of hope, joy, and love. In this series, you will hear stories that will cause you to see God's love in your life. I invite you to join us every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern to explore, discover, and experience the red thread of God's love in your life. Thank you for joining the premiere. Today, I'll be sharing some of my stories. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to our premiere of My Story, a series of hope. In this series, we will have on guests who will share stories that will infuse us with hope. Their stories will reveal the red thread of God's love, even in those moments that were so dark and they may not have recognized it. I want to highlight the stories of regular people like you and me, because we all have incredible stories of hope that the world deserves to hear. And on my podcast, Authentic Faith, I want to introduce Sunday Stories, where we will highlight stories of regular people like you and me so that we can be inspired with hope and know that it's not for some, but for all. That God moves for all of us, that God is pursuing you and me, no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, no matter what you've been through, you are precious to God. Sometimes it can be hard to remember that because things get so dark. I know because I've been there. And that is why I have the honor of introducing this series to you. My name is Andrea John. I am a coach, a speaker, an author who lives to inspire you with the love of God, because I believe that it can transform your life. And I believe this because His love has transformed my life. Today, I'll be starting off with some of my stories. Moments that were so dark and scary and felt hopeless in that moment. But now looking back, I could see God in that moment. I could see how He was with me. I wish that I had people showcasing God's love in those dark moments, but I didn't. And that's why I'm making a change. I'm going to highlight God in every moment of our lives, because when we recognize that He's there, it changes everything. It changed everything for me. So I'll be sharing some stories quickly, but I don't want you to get wrapped up in the story itself. I want you to focus on who God was in that moment, on who God is right now. I don't want you to get caught up in the drama of the details of what happened. I want you to perceive God in that moment. Within my story are other people outside myself. And I have no desire to make people look bad or to ruin anyone's reputation. So obviously, I won't be sharing anyone's name. And I won't be telling their side of the story. I'll be telling my side of the story, how what happened impacted me. But again, most importantly, what I want you to see is the red thread of God's love within those moments. I want to start off with a moment that I haven't really talked about in public. As a matter of fact, I would say that I was in denial about the situation, and I had almost forgotten that it happened. Up until several months ago, I was in a business meeting. We were in a restaurant surrounded by amazing people, and there was a prominent leader in the church there. And everyone went around the room talking about who they are and their stories. I was one of the last people to go. And obviously, I was trying to be in the moment and listening. So I had no idea what was going to come out of my mouth. I just knew that I wanted to be real, raw, and authentic. Well, as I started to share my story, this story that I'm about to share with you came up. And I cried at the table because the pain that was associated, the horror that came with that story was so intense. I had never thought about it. I had never stopped to think about how serious this moment was in my life, the impact that it had, and the lies that came with it. Until this night, where I was in the middle of a restaurant, crying around a bunch of people, because this moment had such an impact on me, and it finally surfaced. One day, I was sitting on the edge of my bed with a gun pointed to my head. This gun, supposedly, was empty. There were no bullets in there. But as this gun was being held to my head, the words that were being uttered were something like, I don't know why, but sometimes I just feel like killing you. I feel like getting rid of you. I don't know why, it just is. And suddenly, the trigger was pulled. Nothing happened. Nothing came out. I was still there, frozen, because someone just had a gun to my head and pulled the trigger. Again, the sentiments behind what was happening, what I was hearing was, sometimes I just want to kill you. I don't know why, I just do. And the gun was pulled up, the trigger was pulled again, except this time, a bullet came out. Both of us in complete and utter shock, because just a moment before, when the trigger was pulled, that gun was up against my temple. Actually, it was on this side. I was sitting on the side of my bed, and the gun was on this side. Pull the trigger. Nothing happened. Gun goes up. Pull the trigger. Bullet goes up. Shock. Oh my gosh. Like 1 second before, I could have been non-existent. I could have been gone forever with my 2 daughters just down a hallway in their bedroom. The horror of that moment was so terrible that I pretty much was in denial about what just happened, how close I was to losing my life. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. And I can say it with no pain or resentment or bitterness, because the reality is that God showed up that day. And God made sure that no one could take my life, that evil could not touch me. Until today, I see God doing that over and over and over again. Maybe you've had a moment where you could have lost your life in a matter of seconds. Maybe it's not the same situation I had. Maybe you've thought of taking your own life and you've come so close, just seconds away. But something happened, something came in and stopped it. I want you to see God in that moment, God taking care of you. Maybe God was the farthest thing from your mind, but here you are, watching this, listening to this, and God is sending you a message. My child, I am with you. I desire to have a relationship with you. You are not alone. You are never alone. I am here with you. Will you perceive me? Will you reach out to me? That is God. Another moment, I was a fitness coach and I had a client over at my house and we were having a meeting. So we were, going through the meeting and it was like an assessment meeting and we were making a plan and all that stuff. And just before someone had come over to pick up my daughters to spend the weekend with them. So my daughters left the house, and here I was with this beautiful woman. And we were, in the midst of fitness health coaching, and someone knocks on my door. And I have no idea who it is. So I go downstairs and I open the door, and there's a man with some lanyard on, and he tells me that he is from the health department. And he asks me if anyone has told me that I was exposed to syphilis and had to go get tested. I had no idea what syphilis was. Crazy, I know, to some of you. But I just need you to understand that I grew up in church, and I've always been like that good girl, and I really never had an appetite for, drinking and drugs. I've never done drugs in my life. I've never smoked in my life. I have no desire. It's just who I am. But here was the health department asking me if I knew I was exposed to syphilis, and telling me that I needed to go get tested. I had no idea who this man was. He had on a lanyard, but the words that he was speaking were so unfamiliar to me that I asked him to hold on 1 second. And I ran upstairs, and this lovely woman, I'll call her Lisa, was in my home, and she was a Christian woman. She was a godly woman, and she was definitely a prophetic one. She also was a nurse. So as soon as I come up to ask her, Lisa says, I heard what happened, and this is really weird because the health department usually calls. They do not make house visits. And she proceeded to tell me what to ask and all these things because I had no idea. So I asked her what syphilis was, and she said, don't worry about it. Just ask these questions and see what he says. So I go downstairs, I ask the questions, he gives me the answers, and I see his ID. I get the information from him, and he leaves. So I close the door, I come upstairs, and as I get upstairs, Lisa closes her notebook because she obviously heard what happened, closes her notebook and said, we're going to pray right now. And we close our eyes, and I'm in shock because the significance of this moment was not just that I was exposed to syphilis, but it was how I found out that my husband had been cheating on me. I was mortified, embarrassed, in shock. Not surprised per se, but kind of surprised that I would even find out this way. And Lisa closed her notebook, and we closed our eyes and we prayed. And she stopped in the middle of her prayer and she said, you are not to look up what syphilis is. You don't need to know what it is. You are not to claim this. You do not have it. So, and then she kept talking, and this peace came on me. It was incredible. And I went on with my weekend, and I didn't call my ex-husband. I did not yell. I did not scream. I just felt this incredible peace of God in a moment that could have destroyed me. And I spent that weekend alone at home. And I prayed and I sought God, and I picked up the phone, and I finally called my parents and my brother and let them know what was happening in my life. Because up until that point, no one knew. I mean, I would say maybe 2 or 3 people knew outside of me and my core family. But my parents and my brother didn't really know what was happening. So it was such a serious moment. And I knew I couldn't do it alone anymore. So I called them and I told them everything, not just what had happened, but the whole story. I wound up going to the health department, and I did get tested, and I did have to get a shot. And thankfully, everything was okay. But in that moment, even then, I realized how God prepared that situation to reveal the truth to me, to uncover what was hidden, but He made sure that there was someone there to be with me. He never left me alone. He held my hand through that whole situation. He kept me calm and in peace, and I didn't break. It gave me the knowledge and understanding to make decisions that were necessary. It was heart-wrenching and heartbreaking. But in both of those moments, God was there. He was with me. He never left me. Yes, it was dark. Yes, it felt hopeless. Yes, it felt like my life was over. How can I go forward from here? Where in the world am I going to go? But with God being there, there was a peace that made no sense to the human mind. Yes, there was sadness. There was distraught. There was despair. But there was peace because I knew God was with me, because I knew I wasn't alone, because I knew although I didn't know what my next step was, I knew that He was with me, and all I had to do was ask, and He would guide me. Maybe you've received tragic news. Maybe it wasn't like mine. Maybe it was the news that someone you love has passed away, that there was an accident, that someone's in a coma. Maybe you've received news that was heart-wrenching, and there was that sudden phone call to ask you how you're doing. Or nowadays, those texts of someone you haven't heard from in such a long time, but suddenly they reached out because they just wanted to say hi. That's the red thread of God's love in your life. I want you to see how He's reaching out to you, how He's calling to you, how He's telling you how much He loves you. And it doesn't matter what you've gone through or what you've done or how you feel, how much you're pushing Him away. His desire is to have a relationship with you. And aside from anything that we could see or not see in our lives, the proof is in the life of Jesus. Because when Jesus died on the cross, God was reconciling us to Himself. He was making a bridge that had no enclosure. He was building a bridge that could never be shut down, that could never close, that could never rot. That bridge is always open. And He loves you so much that He gives you the freedom to come and to go. That bridge is never closed. But I'll tell you what, His heart is to see you walk across that bridge and come closer to Him. His desire is that He sees you crossing that bridge. And even if you just came to Him because you needed something, He's so happy to see you because all He wants is to have relationship with you. His heart is for you. You live in His heart, and He wants to live in your heart. It's beautiful. So those are the two stories that I wanted to share. Of course, I have many stories. I have a very long journey that I've lived, and you have a journey that you're on, and you have your own stories. And what I encourage you to do today is to take a look at some of your stories and really think about it and ask, was God there, but I just didn't notice? Or maybe you're going through something now. I encourage you to ask, is God here? Is He in my story? And if you don't see it, take a moment and ask God, are you here? Are you in my story? And give Him time to answer. You may hear something in your heart. Maybe you hear a thought and you think it's just you. But when you ask God a question, authentically, sincerely, I want you to trust that He's going to answer you. And I'm asking you that because I believe that He will answer that question. God, are you in my story? I want to thank you for joining me today. I thank you for being a part of this premiere and this launch. Over the next several weeks, we're going to have some amazing guests share some incredible stories of hope. They're going to share their dark moments and their great moments. We're going to learn different ways to perceive and to see God. We're going to explore different aspects of God. And hopefully, through all of these stories, you're going to be able to start noticing the red thread of God's love in your life. You are so very loved by the Creator of the universe. And I thank you for watching. If you know someone who is in a dark place and needs some hope, they're struggling to see God because it's kind of dark right now, share this series with them. Because I believe that faith is the evidence and substance of things unseen. And what lies in the details of these stories are the things unseen. It is faith, it is hope, and most importantly, it is love. I'm Andrea John, the host of My Story. Thank you, and see you next week.